Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to the stream. Today we are talking about what is the best reverb plugin in 2020. Now, for those of you who have been following me here on YouTube for a while, you know that I do a lot of reviews of plugins, and we talk quite a bit about mixing and how to produce your music to sound the best it possibly can. So this is certainly a topic that I get a lot of questions about this because there are so many different types of plugins out there, may it be compressors or EQs and limiters and those types of things. But what's interesting about reverbs is it's a highly preferential item. So what might sound good to me might sound completely different to you. And there's a ton of reverbs out there on the market. So I think it's really important that we enter this conversation with the mindset that what works for me may not work for you. And it's really important to try out different reverbs and whenever possible, grab some of the free demos so that you can try it out for yourself. Now, another little side note here, this very well may be my last YouTube live stream, here on YouTube at least. I'm going to continue producing videos every week as I have been, but just a side note for those of you who've been following my live streams here, I'm going to try out Twitch for a little while and see how that works, specifically just for my live composing streams and things like that. And so if you'd like to be part of that, head over to twitch.tv/StephenMillenAudio, link in the description. But for today, we're going to take the next few minutes. We're going to compare my three favorite reverbs. There are a ton out there. There are things like Altiverb, which is like $700. But I like to pitch items to you that are budget friendly and really get a lot bang for your buck. Because I know a lot of you guys are starting off in your music careers and you may only have $30, or maybe you have a couple hundred and you're willing to spend to really get a better sound immediately. So I'm going to throw these three plugins onto a variety of tracks today. I want to show you just how I would use it in my composing and how this could really be a beneficial thing for you. So let's dive right into it. And as always, since this is a live stream, I love to hear questions from you so I can help answer really just your top questions about how to best use this in your style of music. Let's take a look. So if I open up my session here, I'm in a blank session of Cubase, and I've just tossed in a few things here. We have a keyscape piano. We have a full orchestra. Sounds like this. Then we got some French horns. And we have a little vocal line.
Trotting through the tree.
And so if we pop over to my left screen over here, you'll notice that really all I have going on here today is in my stereo out, I have an L1 limiter, which is from Waves, which just helps to keep my out ceiling to -0.1. That way nothing peaks and I don't break your ears because we don't want that. And then below that is just a Voxingo recorder plugin, which allows you to hear my audio from my DAW here today. And so just as a little shootout test today, I wanted to compare IR-1, which is a Waves plugin, which is only $30 right now, which is way on sale. And I should probably show that to you just so we're on the same page here today. It's normally $249. So this is something you've had your eye on for a while. I'd totally take advantage of that, down to $30. And there's a link in the description below if you want to support my channel. There's an affiliate link there. And then the other one we're going to be comparing here is 2C Aether, which is from 2C Audio. I've been using this for a very long time. You guys see me talk about this quite a lot, and it's a tremendous plugin. And we'll talk about that in just a few minutes, but that's really great. And that one is on sale as well. That is actually for $149 right now, and that's Aether right there. And what I love about Aether is it's not only a reverb, but it has frequencies in it as well. So it actually has an EQ in it as well. Now the EQ is just for the reverb, but it has a lot of control, ton of fun there. And then the third choice for today is B2, which is really an experimental sound effect almost generation tool, which really helps us create huge and full body sounds. And that is also at $149, normally $249. So we're looking at a $30 range up to $149 today, but those are also pretty huge sales. And, you know, I've been talking about this quite a bit, but during this quarantine season, perhaps you're in the future watching this video, it may not have the same impact. So take advantage of this if you're here right now. But right now, as of May 20th, 2020, we're still in this social distancing quarantine season. And many of you have been looking into things like camera gear or any type of audio gear like microphones and that type of thing. Those prices are very inflated right now. So it's really hard to do any type of reviews on those, because if I recommend it, it's going to be $100 extra, $200 extra. So that's not the right time to make those types of purchases. But what is interesting is the flip side is if we take a look at digital software, so music sample libraries and plugins, those things are extremely on sale right now. It's almost like Black Friday. A lot of companies are going 60 to 80% off just because, they need business, and it's just a very interesting time. So if you've been waiting to make a purchase on some plugins, this is the time versus hardware. So just want to throw that disclaimer out there. So if we take a look back in my session here, let's show what's actually going on under the hood and why you might want to consider adding these to your arsenal. I already have a question from Chaz in the live chat who says, do you create with IR-1, also early reflections? So what he's referring to is in IR-1, which is Waves flagship reverb over here. What he's referring to is there are two different types of reverbs out there. I want to make sure I say this correctly, because this confused me for the longest time. But there are two different types of reverbs out there. There's convolution reverb, which is a literal IR, an impulse response. So what this means, something like Waves IR1, that's why it's called IR, it stands for impulse response. So what happens is someone will take a microphone and they'll go into, say, an orchestral hall or cavern or a train station, whatever. What they do is they make a sound. They'll maybe clap their hands or they'll shoot some loud sound. Or they might get a giant amplifier, a speaker, and play a giant sine wave. But what they're doing is they're creating one large hit that kind of goes away, and then all of a sudden, they capture that reverberation, that reverb, the reflections. And what they're doing is they're going to take that 10, 15 seconds, 20 seconds, however long it actually is, take that wave file recording, and then turn it into what's called an IR file. So when you have an IR file, you could throw it into an engine such as IR-1, which it reads IR, these impulse responses, these files that allows whatever sound you attach it to a plugin, it allows that sound to add the reverb. Sounds highly technical, but really this is what a reverb plugin is. It's taking your sound and throwing it through the plugin. And so this convolution reverb was really revolutionary about 15, 20 years ago in the industry, because for the first time, someone came up with a plugin that allowed your sound, your orchestra, your piano to sound like it's in another location. So this is a very powerful plugin. It's been around for a very long time. It's been a staple in the industry. So if you don't have it, you might want to pick it up just because it's such a classic sound that really has not aged at all. It's simple, and we'll go through that in a second, but you compare that convolution reverb to something like an algorithmic reverb, and that's what B2 and Aether are. Now these algorithmic reverbs are artificial. They are kind of electronic replications of these sounds, and we do that by adding EQ and adding delays and other types of plug-in sounds that help morph the sound to kind of almost artificially sound like it's in the space. So I hope that you can hear that today as we do a little demo with each of these instruments, and you'll be able to hear, okay, yeah, that sounds like it's artificial, but sometimes you want that. And so really this shootout today is not to prove that one is better than the other, but really just to hopefully consider, okay, which is the best for me right now with the type of music I write. So let's jump into it. Enough talking. So over here in my mixer, I'm going to pull open IR-1. So let's do a little shootout. So if I just have a basic piano sound, just like this is just a keyscape cinematic grand piano. Make sure that we can all hear that. So that's just the natural recording of it in a small studio space. But if we add IR1 on top of it, here's just the default sound. It's an okay sound, but let's be honest, nobody needs 100% wet of any reverb. Typically, I would always suggest to do about 20% or 30%. That's exactly the same as if you were in photography, if you're in videography and you have a piece of footage and you're trying to throw a LUT on top of it, an LUT, it's a filter, right? You don't want to go 100%, it's too much. Go like 20%, 30%, because what we're trying to do is represent that space without going overboard with it. So now let's just do this particular sound, which is a concert hall. Sounds really good to me. And you can play around with this knob here and you can kind of see how bare bones IR1 is. But what's really nice about this is you can adjust things like the size. So that's at 100%, but what would 168% sound like? Or even 209? A little bit too much to my ears, but you can play around with these. And good thing about all of these plugins is they all have default sounds. So you can go over here to the load button and you can go to just one of these 3 setups, or actually 4 setups. We have hall reverbs, room reverbs, studio reverbs, and plate reverbs. So it's actually only 4 different presets. But what you do is you go and you reset the sound. So if I want it to be a room reverb, we do that. And now I can just play around with my settings again. And it's a very subtle thing, but you kind of hear the reflections of how it very much feels like the room you're in. And that's what you're going to get with convolution reverb. So anytime you are using realistic sounds, acoustic instruments, particularly orchestral instruments, you're going to find that convolution reverb is going to be the best sound for you. Now let's compare that with 2C Aether. Has many of the same options. If you go over here, you can look how we have halls, church, amphitheater, studio, some small areas, some nature areas, all kinds of things. And I have found that in my world, I typically do the Music Hall 2, which I think is really cool. Really great for orchestral. And typically with orchestral instruments, it sounds really solid in that space. So you'll notice a little bit of a difference here. And let's crank it back down to about 20-30%. What you'll notice here is this plugin, it's not only the reverb, an artificial space, right? Because we have the size, position, shape, the absorption amount, how soft the sound is. But on the other side, we have a frequency. So this, we can actually change low, mids, and highs. We actually tweak these so that the reflections, the reverb that we know, is actually going to bounce off. And it's going to roll off like a filter would, a low cut or a high cut filter. And so you can take that exact same reverb, but the reason this is now an artificial or algorithmic reverb is we can now take this reverberation and cut it off into certain frequencies. So it's more of an experimental thing, but perhaps you have in a film score, you have a lot of orchestral instruments side by side to electronic instruments like synths, and you have really a lot of muddiness perhaps in your low range or in your mid range. You would want to make sure that your reverb in this situation, you wouldn't want to use IR1 because it's going to be this huge fat reverb that takes up all your space. It sounds nice, but not in a film score or a video game score where you're really trying to be very particular about your EQ. So instead, you would choose, in this case, 2C Aether, because then you can work with the EQ of the reverb and maybe lob off some of the low end and mid range. That way, as soon as you play this piano in the middle of the score with, who knows what instruments are around it, it allows you to have the intimacy of the original piano recording, but then the reflections are not taking up any more space than they need to. So again, it's a bit of a technical thing, but there is a purpose for both of these in your music. Let's go to the third one. This is probably my favorite of the three, only because it's experimental and interesting. And this is B2. Now this is one I've only recently started using. B2 is just kind of a crazy engine that combines multiple reverbs, combines delay, and it combines EQ. So you might have something simple. For example, you can go to the clarity expansion and maybe we just want to grab piano because it has a dedicated preset just for piano. And so you might have a dark piano chamber. Which is beautiful, but we have all these different versions. Piano Palace. Now you could always go to the main tab here and you could see what's going on with the diffusion over here in this second category, or the dampening over here. It's just a very interesting way to write music. Now you could certainly use B2 as a replacement for Aether or for IR-1, but again, this is an algorithmic reverb, so it's going to have a little bit more of a manufactured electronic vibe to it. So if you're trying to create more ambient music, I would absolutely use B2 because it's not trying to replicate necessarily a real space, but what it's trying to do is create an ethereal type sound, very much like the Valhalla Room or Valhalla Shimmer effect. You may be familiar with that company. So my favorite way to use this though is more of the experimental side. And you guys have seen me do these before in my tracks, but something like this. Let's take that exact same piano, but let's throw something like Cloudy Vision on it. And now it's like a stinking synth. And you might be wondering, how the heck is that possible with reverb? It's because of all of these parameters over here, the diffusion of the sound. It's actually throwing it and warping it. And you could take this one piano sound and turn it into 5,000 different types of sounds. So it's almost like this experimental machine. And every time I open this up, I create some new crazy sound I've never used before. So for example, in the special effects tab, I did this the other day and I was just blown away. If we take something like, where was it? Chariots of Tyre with my piano sound. Check that out. It like morphs the sound as it goes into the room. Makes it sound like a Rhodes now, or a Whirly, an electric piano, or even something like this sci-fi one. It puts a huge delay on the attack, and when it does come, it like repeats it with all these delays. So how cool is that? And I could go all day with these crazy sounds. So I would definitely recommend B2 if you are going to create more experimental type sounds. And you can even hear it right now. It's still going. It's like a 30-second tail on it. Question in the chat says, I saw concepts where composers use only the ER from convolution. After that, they will then use algorithmic reverb to create the tail. Have you experienced with that? Nope, I have not. I've not done that personally. I don't feel the need to mix the two, like convolution and algorithmic, in the same track or in the same instrument. However, it just kind of depends on what you want to do. You can always experiment. But the main concept here today is figure out what type of sound you're trying to create, what type of space you want your music to sound like it's in, and then choose the appropriate plugin to do the job. So if you want your music to sound like it's in an actual space, use convolution. And if you want to sound more experimental and ethereal, ambient, electronic, or even hybrid type scores, which I believe would be most of us if we're talking about film music or game music, then I'd definitely stick with the Aether and B2 world, because we're talking about algorithmic then. So let's do a little shootout. I know that was a bit of an explanation, but I want to hop into the session here. So that was a little bit, you might do with the piano, but let's see how it fares with a full orchestra. So for here, I'm just pulling up a Largo patch from Sonokinetic, where I just hold a chord. So that's with nothing on it. It's just a Hall recording, which I think sounds pretty standard. So if you wanted to create more of a classical score where we're only focusing on that clean sound, then I would use IR-1. And I'd probably grab a concert hall, because remember, I only have 4 different options here. So I'd grab a hall, and I'd probably drag it down to about 20%. And then if I want it to sound fuller or richer, I would change the size. I'd go up from 100%. So let's hear what it sounds like. That's gorgeous to me. And what I love about IRs in general is they have a very realistic response, because it's literally taking my orchestra and throwing it into the hall that they recorded it in. And it has a very natural decay. Notice it's not this like 20-second long reverb that is a cathedral or whatever, right? I love how natural that sounds. And that's what I would use if I'm creating like a string quartet or a maybe just strings or maybe just brass and woodwinds, things that are very natural sounding. That's going to be the place to do that. So let's compare that, the exact same patch, with 2C Aether. So here I would take probably a musical hall 2 or 3. Let's grab the mix down. Let's leave the EQ alone. It's at a 3.5 time. So you can hear how that one sounds a little bit electronic, because it has a very long reverb tail. Very interesting, huh? So we could always play with that by maybe taking the time down. But what my ears hear as of right now is it's a flat frequency. So you can play around with that by making it dark or natural, modern, whatever. You can actually play around, do some special effects with just the frequency, the release. So let's play a few of them. So you see how that one, it actually closed the sound up really quickly. Compare that to something like a natural sound, and they don't have any labels. There's just like 20 different versions here. But thankfully we can visually see what's happening with this little blue curve here. We can see that it's boosting the mids a little bit and it's cutting off the highs. So they're just different ways of making your music sound like it's in a different space, a little bit more experimental. So let's compare that with B2, what I would do with this orchestral patch. So let's go over here to the browser. Let's just do the dual engine, and let's try maybe a dynamic space to sound more realistic. And I'll find crossfading halls. So you can see how that's a very, very long reverb. But it also has this bigger than life feel to it. So you're really gonna use B2 to create ambient music or just huge music, epic music, trailer music. This is the thing to use because it's gonna take something that's otherwise small and maybe raw, and it's going to make it soar. And we're gonna really hear that when we get to the solo instruments next. So let's do that. Let's go over to our French horn patch. Let's do the same thing. So if we just have the bass sound, so we got 6 French horns. It's already a pretty solid orchestral hall just baked into the recording itself. But we take that and we want to throw some, I don't know, I would still do a concert hall. Let's do the exact same thing as before with IR-1. Let's drag it down to about 20%. Turn it on. Now to my ears, I feel like that needs to go a lot more. Perhaps the size needs to increase so that we can feel like the horns are much further back than they actually are. I like that a lot. I think that's going to be the winner, only because it's a real hall space and it has this depth to it. So notice I only increased the dry to wet ratio a little bit. I really don't want to go above like 35% because then we start making it super wet and unclear. So instead I increased the size of the reverb, and you can actually see that we start playing around here. It doesn't do it in real time because this is an ancient plugin, but you can see this curve here, this little staircase. It will increase every time I change it. So notice like all the way down, it's a very steep slope, and then all the way up, it has a more jaggedy, more even, like a triangle slope. So I think that sounded pretty good. I don't know if the other two are going to be able to beat it. Let's find out. Let's see if we can make a better sound. So let's maybe go to Orchestral Hall 3, which is a larger hall within 2C Aether, and let's leave all the settings alone at 50% mix. Do you hear that? It sounds so fake to me. It's like the reverb is swimming in like these crackles. It's very jaggedy, and it's not pleasant like the sample is meant to be. So let's see if we can improve that by changing maybe to a different hall. Nope, it's still super bright to my ears. So maybe turn the mix down. Nope, maybe the size or the time. Hope you can hear that. And if you can't hear it, perhaps put on some headphones or put on, some studio monitors that you trust to hear the difference. Because to my ears, it's a night and day difference in how muddy these horns have become just by putting the wrong reverb on it. So you might compare that with, if we play around with the frequencies here, maybe making it darker will help. It just doesn't work to me at all. So let's go back to what we had with the IR-1 just so our ears can be refreshed. We had it at what? Like 160. I should have changed it, but there we go. That's so much more pleasant to my ears. And what's pretty wild here is we're talking about a price difference of $120. So that Waves plugin that's making the better sound right now, that's $30 on sale. The 2C Aether is $150 on sale. So it's a $120 difference for a worse sound. But it's all about context, right? It's about what are you trying to produce? You got to use the right tools. Cost has nothing to do with it. Okay, let's go to the last one here as our comparison. Let's see what we can do with it. B2. Let's try to get a more organic sound out of this. Let's go to the single engine and let's go to a hall. Let's try, so many options. It's crazy how big this is. Let's do a standard hall. And let's look down here, just what's going on. So we have the time at 2.7, the size is 25. Here we go. I think this is an improvement to the 2C Aether, but to me it's still very muddy. Even if we turn the size down and the time and all that. To me it just has a very bright feeling to it that you really can't get rid of. So that, not my favorite for solo horns or an orchestral organic sound. It just doesn't work. So now let's go on to vocals. Vocals are very, very important. I would argue that vocal reverb is one of the trickiest things to do because you can't overdo it and it has to sit on top of a mix. It has to work. So I already know which one's going to work the best because I've experimented with this before, but I want you to decide. I'd love to hear for those watching right now live. You have the advantage. Comment in the live chat right now. Which of these three actually sounds the most pleasant to your ears? Let's see if we can find this. So this little clip, this is actually from The Boar Night, which is a series I'm working on. This is the main theme that we did. Here's the raw recording.
Trotting through the trees, saving lives with great ease.
So we had a rock band behind that with some orchestral music and stuff. If we play this clip, let's go over to this screen over here. And as I play the clip, I want to see if we can make it work with the IR-1, particularly with the studio impulse response. Let's just see what we can do with it.
Trotting through the trees.
Ooh, do you hear that? Do you hear how closed it becomes?
Saving lives with great ease. He's the hero we need.
That sounds pretty good to me. That could be a contender right there. So let's save that. Now let's go over to 2C Aether. Let's see if there's perhaps a studio setting that we like. Maybe go down to like 20%.
Trotting through the trees.
Do you hear that? Man, it's crazy. It's crazy how dirty that sound becomes, even at 20% in a studio. Maybe turn down the time of it. Let's see if that helps. Turn on the mix of it. Let's just see what we can do.
Trotting through the trees,
Better.
saving lives with great ease.
Right, a little bit better.
Trotting through the trees, saving lives with great ease.
So what's interesting here is even though I shortened the size and the time and the mix to very small amounts in this studio hall space, or not a hall, but the studio algorithmic reverb, it doesn't sound very real. It has this very artificial sound to it. But that's what you get with algorithmic reverb, and you got to know what you're working with. So let's take a look. Let's see if B2 can save the day. I have a strong feeling that B2 will save the day. Here's why. If you go to the browser here, one of the coolest parts about this is it has separate reverbs for separate occasions. So if we were to go to the single engine vocals, check this out. This is one of the coolest things. We actually have reverbs designed just for verses, just for choruses, just for the lead vocal, for the backup vocals, and everything in between. So this is a verse for the song. So let's go to a clear verse vocal 1, and let's see if just the preset by itself can do the job.
Trotting through the trees, saving lives with great ease.
That sounds really good to my ears. Now, I might not use as much size and time.
Trotting through the trees, saving lives.
Because what it's actually doing is it's actually adding a little bit of chorus. So the chorus plugin type where it doubles the sound on top of itself in very close increments. It's actually making this sound fatter than it really is, which is a very important thing when you're creating this big, almost anime style vocal line on top of a big orchestra and rock band. It has to cut through. So let's pretend like this was actually the chorus. Let's go down to lead chorus vocal, and let's see what it sounds like if I just kind of jump between them.
Trotting through the trees, saving lives with great ease. He's the hero we need. Friendship and daring, here comes the Boar Night now.
Interesting. So what I want to do is to show off B2 just a little bit. I'm going to create a few different tracks here, and I'm going to pull open, if I can find it. I was not planning to do this, but I think it's going to be a really cool shootout as well. I'm going to open up that Boar Night session. I'm actually just going to drag the harmonies from the vocal, because it wasn't just the vocal line, it was actually some harmonies in the background. I want to show you how fast and easy something like B2 in this instance can really help with it. So I actually have multiple takes here. So let's just do 2 of the harmony tracks. I'll throw them into the session. I want you to hear, if I were to solo each of these over here in my session. So you'll notice how right about here,
The time, friendship and daring, the wheels to spin, friendship and
I'm gonna turn off the B2 for a second.
wheels to spin, friendship and daring. When noble new tales to spin, friendship and tales to spin, friendship and daring, music and caring. Now's the time.
Let's see if I can line this up a little bit better. Right about there.
Tales to spin, friendship and daring, music and caring. Now's the time.
Do the same thing here.
Tales to caring. Now's a born night. Now a born night. Now a born night. Tales to spin, friendship and daring, music and caring. Now's the time.
So let's just deal with that for a second. Let's just have 2 vocals here. So if I take the first vocal and if I throw B2 on top of it, and let's put the presets without even changing it. Let's go to single engine vocals. Let's do chorus lead vocal 1. And then if I go to the first harmony here, open up a new session of B2 and go over to same thing, vocals, and go down to chorus vocal 2. Let's see if it already has a distancing baked in.
Caring, now's the time. Here comes the born night.
I know it's pitchy, but still.
Tales to spin, friendship and daring, music and caring. Now's the time.
That sounds really good to me. So what I would do in this situation is I would go down to the mix itself, the size and the time of the first one and the second one. Just drag them down. They're a little bit extreme to me, but
Will win noble new tales to spin, friendship and daring, music and caring. Now's the time. Here comes the born night. Now.
right? So that worked out pretty well. And that's more or less what I ended up doing on the actual mix of it. Once I did a little bit of auto-tune and, timed it all correctly, it sounded really solid. But anyway, that's the gist of it today. So hopefully this is helpful for you to better determine when you are choosing a reverb to use for your music. Decide between, do I want something to sound realistic, like it's in a real space, an IR, impulse response, then use IR-1 from Waves. Again, it's only $30 right now on sale. Link in the description below if you want to grab that today. That is an affiliate link that supports my channel at no additional cost to you. Take advantage of that. Coronavirus going crazy, right? This is the time to get sample instruments and plugins, not the time to get hardware. On the flip side, if you want your music to be more experimental and you want it to have more of an ethereal, ambient, or electronic vibe, hybrid style, then I'd highly recommend grabbing either Aether, which is going to be much more like simulated real spaces, like a bathroom or a studio or a hall, or to go all the way extreme into B2, which has some of those, but it's really focused towards the experimental sound design type style, which is going to allow you to have this algorithmic sound to throw onto your instruments to create almost completely new instrument sounds, and to create these huge epic trailer style tracks. They're going to really soar. I use all 3 of these, and I don't think one is better than the other, but I do think that there's different applications for each. In the same way, there's a reason that I have multiple piano patches. There's different times for different pianos. There's no one size fits all. Anyone who tells you otherwise is just lying or try to get you to buy something. My goal here today is not for you to buy anything, but if you do not already have a very strong algorithmic and a very strong, what's the word I'm looking for? Convolution reverb, then go grab those. I think it's going to be very valuable for you. So before I finish up here today, as I wrap up, take a look at the links in the description. David in the chat is saying, I don't see any links or description at all. YouTube Live is being weird. And I got to be totally honest, guys. This is probably why this is my last YouTube Live, just because there's the setup is very buggy, and that happens sometimes. So I'm making the switch to Twitch. But I'll definitely still be here on YouTube for all my normal produced videos every Wednesday at 10 a.m. So be here for those. Anyway, I will make sure those are in the description immediately following this on the replay. It's going to stay here forever. But I wanted to let you guys know that at the time of this recording, if you'd like a $20 discount off of either of the 2C audio products, the Aether or B2, I'll put this in the description as well, but shoot me an email, steven@stevenmalin.com, and I can get you a custom voucher. I am a partner with 2C Audio, and I can get you a little 20% discount there, which I think will be helpful, especially if you don't have either of those, or maybe you have one, you want to try the other one. And you can always download the demos of both to try them out today to make sure that it fits within your style. And I would highly recommend you try the demos. I think it's going to be very valuable. So anyway, that's all I have for today. Hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.